They laughed at Bruce Lee as he knelt beside his fallen master. The sound wasn't loud, but it cut deep, sharp, careless, cruel. The Karatekas stood in a loose circle, belts still tied tight, fists clenched, breathing heavy from what they had just done. Sweat mixed with arrogance on their faces. To them, this was victory. One of them nudged another and scoffed, pointing at Bruce. "You should have stayed in Hong Kong," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "This isn't your world." The dojo smelled of dust and old wood. A single light flickered overhead. Bruce's master lay motionless on the floor, his chest rising slowly, painfully. Every breath looked like it might be his last. His teachings, years of discipline, patience, and restraint, echoed silently in Bruce's mind. Bruce didn't answer. He stayed where he was, one hand resting gently on his master's shoulder, as if trying to transfer strength through touch alone. The laughter grew louder. "Look at him," another karateka sneered. "He thinks kneeling makes him strong." Then Bruce stood up. Slowly, deliberately. No sudden movement. No dramatic pose. Just calm. His eyes weren't burning with rage. They weren't filled with tears either. They were empty, the kind of emptiness that comes after something sacred is taken from you. And everyone in that dojo felt it. The laughter faded, one voice at a time. Even the most arrogant fighter sensed it, the shift in the air, the quiet pressure settling over the room like a storm before lightning strikes. Bruce didn't glare at them. He didn't point fingers. He simply looked around the circle, meeting each man's eyes, one by one. This wasn't about styles anymore. Not kung fu versus karate. Not pride, not reputation. This was about honor. Bruce took a single step forward. The wooden floor creaked beneath his foot, loud in the sudden silence. In that moment, every instinct inside the dojo screamed the same warning. Something irreversible was about to happen. What followed wouldn't be written in rulebooks. It wouldn't be taught in clean training halls. But for years to come, fighters would whisper about that night. About the moment laughter died. About the calm before the storm. And about the day a student stood up for his master and became a legend. The dojo was packed that evening. Not just with students, but with tension. Word had spread for days that foreign karate champions were moving through the city, issuing open challenges. Wherever they went, humiliation followed. Kung fu schools were mocked, teachers were disrespected, traditions were laughed at like outdated myths. Some masters refused to respond. Others tried, and failed. Tonight, they had chosen this dojo. The karatekas entered loudly, boots heavy against the wooden floor, voices confident, almost celebratory. Their uniforms were crisp, their belts neatly tied, their posture sharp but arrogant. They didn't bow when they stepped inside. They didn't acknowledge the altar at the front of the room. To them, this wasn't a sacred place, it was a stage. Students along the walls exchanged uneasy glances. They had trained their entire lives to control ego, to respect lineage, to honor those who came before them. What stood before them now was the opposite of everything they had been taught. The lead karateka stepped forward, clapping slowly. "So this is kung fu," he said with a smirk. "I expected more." Murmurs spread through the room. Some students clenched their fists. Others lowered their eyes. Then Bruce Lee's master stepped forward. He was older, slower than he once had been, his movements economical, measured. His presence didn't demand attention, it commanded it. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't insult anyone. He simply stood between his students and the intruders. "You are welcome here," he said calmly. "But arrogance is not." The karatekas laughed. One of them stepped closer, invading his space. "Bow," he said. "Admit kung fu is weak." The master didn't move. "Martial arts are for discipline," he replied, voice steady. "Not ego." The room fell silent. That sentence cost him everything. The first strike came without warning. A kick aimed not to test, but to injure. Before anyone could react, the others joined in. They attacked together. No rules. No mercy. No respect. Students shouted. Some tried to intervene, only to be shoved aside. The sound of fists hitting flesh echoed through the dojo, each impact heavier than the last. The master tried to defend himself, but numbers overwhelmed wisdom. Experience couldn't stop cruelty. And then it was over. The Karatekas stepped back, breathing hard, satisfied. The master lay on the floor, unmoving. At that moment, the doors opened. Bruce Lee had arrived. He froze in the doorway, eyes instantly finding the broken figure on the wood. Time slowed. The noise of the room faded into a dull echo. Bruce crossed the floor in seconds and dropped to his knees beside his master. Too late. He could feel it immediately, the damage, the pain, the injustice. Behind him, laughter broke out again. "That's his student," one karateka scoffed. "He looks disappointed." Bruce didn't turn around. His hands slowly curled into fists, knuckles whitening, arms trembling, not with fear, but with restraint. This moment mattered. Backhand index pointing right. If you believe respect for teachers matters, drop a like and comment where you're watching from. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Because what happened next wasn't random. It wasn't luck. It wasn't rage. It was the inevitable result of disrespect crossing a line that should never be crossed. The lead karateka cracked his knuckles slowly, deliberately, enjoying the sound as if it were part of a performance. He tilted his head and looked Bruce up and down, measuring him, dismissing him. "You next, little dragon," he said, lips curling into a grin. "Or are you here to cry with him?" A few of the others laughed. 5 men. Broad shoulders. Years of competition. They had already proven what they could do, or so they believed. Bruce stepped forward. Not fast. Not aggressively. Slowly. Each step echoed against the wooden floor, steady and controlled, as if he were walking into meditation rather than confrontation. He slipped his jacket off his shoulders, smoothed it once, and folded it neatly before placing it on a bench against the wall. That simple act unsettled them more than any threat. Bruce raised his head. "You insulted my master," he said softly. His voice didn't carry anger, but it carried weight. "In Kung Fu, that means you face me." For half a second, the room was quiet. Then it exploded with laughter. One karateka bent forward, hands on his knees. "This guy thinks he's in a movie," another scoffed. "5 of us," the leader said, spreading his arms. "One of you." Students pressed tighter against the walls. Some looked away, unable to watch. Others stared, sensing something terrible and inevitable approaching. The lead karateka gestured toward the center of the dojo. "Ring the bell," he said. "Let's teach him humility." The bell rang. And then, silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that swallows sound. Bruce stood still, feet planted, posture relaxed, hands loose at his sides. He didn't bounce. He didn't pose. His breathing was slow, controlled, almost invisible. To anyone who didn't understand, he looked unprepared. To anyone who did, he looked dangerous. The first karateka charged, shouting as he lunged forward. Bruce didn't retreat. He stepped inside the attack. A blur of movement, too fast to follow. A sharp crack echoed as the attacker flew sideways, crashing into the floor hard enough to shake the room. The laughter died instantly. Before anyone could react, the second karateka came from behind. Bruce turned, intercepting the strike mid-motion, redirecting it with a fluid twist of his hips. A short, explosive palm strike landed squarely in the chest. The man dropped, gasping for air, eyes wide with shock. "What?" someone whispered. The third attacked with rage now, not confidence. Bruce met him head-on. Elbow. Kick. Impact. The fight wasn't beautiful. It was efficient. Each movement had purpose. Each strike ended something. The dojo filled with the sound of bodies hitting wood, of breath leaving lungs, of disbelief turning into fear. The karatekas who had mocked moments earlier now hesitated, their training colliding with something they had never faced, speed without warning, power without wasted motion. The lead karateka stepped back, eyes darting, reassessing. This wasn't a student. This wasn't luck. "This isn't fair," he snapped. Bruce didn't answer. He moved. In a heartbeat, the fourth karateka was down. The fifth stumbled, backing away, balance broken, confidence shattered. The room stood frozen. Students watched in stunned silence. Teachers clenched their fists, unable to believe what they were witnessing. And the lead karateka realized something terrifying. The bell had rung. But this fight wasn't controlled by rules. It was controlled by principle. Bruce stopped, standing alone in the center of the dojo, chest rising calmly as if he had barely broken a sweat. His eyes lifted slowly, locking onto the last man standing. The silence was complete. And everyone understood the same truth at once. This conflict was no longer about winning. It was about answering for every moment of disrespect that had led to this point. Bruce moved first and last. There was no warning, no shout, no dramatic signal. One moment the room was frozen in tension, the next it exploded. Bruce's legs snapped upward in a blur, a kick so fast it sounded like a gunshot echoing through the dojo. The nearest karateka didn't even have time to react. His body lifted off the floor and slammed into the wall hard enough to rattle the hanging scrolls. He dropped in a heap, unconscious before he hit the ground. Gasps rippled through the room. Another karateka charged, anger replacing fear. He rushed forward with a wild punch, trying to overwhelm Bruce with raw force. Bruce stepped inside the attack, closing the distance in a heartbeat. His elbow drove forward, sharp and precise, followed instantly by a palm strike that landed squarely in the man's chest. The sound was dull. Final. The karateka collapsed where he stood, air ripped from his lungs, eyes wide as his body shut down. The dojo turned into chaos. Two more attackers rushed in from opposite sides, shouting as they came. Bruce pivoted smoothly, his movements fluid like water finding its path. A low sweep sent one crashing to the floor. Before the other could adjust, Bruce's heel snapped out, connecting with brutal accuracy. Wood cracked beneath the falling body. Students pressed back against the walls, some covering their mouths, others unable to look away. The teachers stood frozen, witnessing a level of speed and control they had only heard about in stories. Bruce didn't chase. He didn't taunt. He waited. The remaining karatekas hesitated, their training screaming one thing, their instincts another. They circled now, slower, cautious, eyes tracking every breath Bruce took. Sweat dripped down their faces. Confidence had drained from their posture. One made the mistake of stepping in too close. Bruce exploded forward. A short punch landed before the man could blink. A follow-up kick sent him spinning across the floor. He skidded to a stop near the altar, groaning, unable to stand. The lead karateka shouted, trying to regain control. "Together!" he yelled. "Now!" They rushed him all at once. It didn't matter. Bruce became motion. His fists struck like whips, his kicks snapping out with impossible speed. He flowed through them, never staying in one place long enough to be trapped. An elbow here. A knee there. A strike so fast it barely registered before the body fell. Wood splintered as someone hit a support beam. A bench tipped over. Dust rose into the air, lit by the harsh overhead lights. And through it all, Bruce's face never changed. No rage. No hatred. Only focus. Only control. Every movement carried purpose. Every strike ended the fight for the man who received it. The lead karateka tried one last desperate charge, throwing everything he had into a single attack. Bruce sidestepped effortlessly, letting the force pass him by. In one smooth motion he turned, delivering a final kick that dropped the man flat on his back. Silence slammed down on the dojo. Bodies lay scattered across the floor. Groans echoed softly, the only sounds left. Bruce stood alone at the center, chest rising steadily, breathing calm, almost meditative. He looked around once, making sure no one else intended to rise. No one did. He turned and walked back toward his master, kneeling beside him once more. The contrast was striking, the same calm presence, now surrounded by the aftermath of destruction. Every person in that room understood the message without a single word being spoken. This was not brutality. This was discipline answering disrespect. You chose the wrong master to insult, and the wrong student to challenge. The final karateka backed away slowly, his heels scraping against the wooden floor. His hands were still raised, but they trembled now. His breathing was uneven, shallow, like a man who had just woken from a nightmare and realized it wasn't over yet. This "This isn't karate," he whispered, almost to himself. His voice carried through the dojo, fragile and broken. Moments earlier, that same voice had been loud with mockery. Now it barely held together. Bruce stood a few steps away, perfectly still. Around them, bodies lay scattered, some groaning softly, others unmoving. The confidence that had filled the room at the beginning of the night was gone, replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. Even the air felt different, thick with realization. Bruce stepped closer. Not threatening. Not rushed. Just close enough. "No," Bruce said calmly. His voice was quiet, but it carried farther than shouting ever could. "This is consequence." The word landed harder than any strike. The karateka swallowed, eyes darting toward the door, toward escape, toward anything that wasn't standing in front of him. But his legs wouldn't move. Fear had rooted him in place. "I didn't mean," he stuttered. Bruce didn't interrupt. He didn't argue. He simply waited. In that pause, everything caught up. The laughter. The insults. The way they had surrounded an old master and struck without mercy. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was accountability. The karateka gathered what little courage he had left and lunged, desperate, sloppy, driven by panic rather than skill. It was the move of someone who knew he had already lost. Bruce moved once. A single, clean motion. Precise. Final. The strike landed, controlled but absolute. The karateka crumpled instantly, collapsing to the floor without another sound. And then, nothing. The dojo stood frozen. No one spoke. No one moved. Students stared wide-eyed, hands covering mouths, hearts pounding in their chests. Teachers exchanged looks of disbelief, of awe, of understanding. This wasn't violence for entertainment. This was something older. Something deeper. Bruce remained where he was for a moment, eyes lowered, breathing steady. He didn't raise his arms. He didn't claim victory. There was no celebration in his posture. He turned slowly and walked back to his master. Kneeling beside him again, Bruce gently adjusted his master's position, checking his breathing, his pulse. The fight had ended, but the responsibility hadn't. That mattered more than anything else. The students finally found their voices, but they spoke in whispers now. The same room that had echoed with laughter earlier now felt like a place of mourning and respect. No one dared step forward. Everyone understood that they had just witnessed a turning point, not just in a fight, but in a lesson that would never be forgotten. Backhand index pointing right. If this moment gave you chills, comment, respect, and subscribe for more legendary martial arts stories. Don't miss the next one. Because moments like this aren't about who falls. They're about why someone stands. And tonight, Bruce Lee didn't stand for himself. He stood for every teacher who was ever disrespected, every lesson that was ever mocked, and every student who understood that true strength answers arrogance, not with ego, but with consequence. Bruce knelt beside his master once more. The same floor that had witnessed mockery and cruelty now felt heavy with reverence. Bruce's movements were gentle, careful, as if the world had slowed itself out of respect. He placed one hand beneath his master's shoulder, the other steadying his back, making sure he could breathe without pain. Around them, the room had changed. The karatekas who could still move struggled to sit up, their pride shattered more painfully than their bodies. The students who had once been pressed fearfully against the walls now stood straighter, their eyes no longer clouded with helplessness. Even the teachers, hardened by years of discipline, felt something tighten in their throats. No one spoke. One by one, heads lowered. The room that had once mocked now bowed in silence. Not to Bruce's fists. Not to defeat. But to loyalty. To the unspoken bond between a master and a student, a bond stronger than fear, stronger than numbers, stronger than arrogance. Bruce didn't acknowledge the bows. He didn't need to. His focus remained where it had always been, on the man who taught him how to stand before he ever learned how to fight. When help finally arrived, it came quietly. There were no sirens, no shouting. The master was carried out with care, students lining the path without being asked. Bruce followed close behind, his expression calm, but his eyes filled with something deeper than relief. The dojo doors closed behind them. What remained inside was not defeat, it was understanding. Within weeks, the karate school involved in that night shut its doors. Official reasons were given: internal issues, restructuring, relocation. But everyone in the martial arts community knew the truth. Reputation is everything in that world, and respect once broken is nearly impossible to restore. The story didn't stay quiet. It moved the way legends always do, slowly at first, then all at once. From one dojo to another. From teachers to students. From whispered conversations after training to long discussions late into the night. Details changed, as they always do. Some said Bruce fought 10 men. Some said no one even touched him. Others swore the room went silent before the first strike, like the world itself was holding its breath. But the heart of the story never changed. It was never about violence. It was about loyalty. About a student who arrived too late to prevent injustice, but not too late to answer it. About honor, not the kind written on banners or shouted before matches, but the quiet kind that lives in actions, not words. About never forgetting who taught you how to stand. Years later, fighters would reference that night without naming it directly. Remember the lesson, they would say. Remember what happens when respect disappears. Bruce Lee never spoke publicly about what happened. When asked, he simply redirected the conversation back to training, back to discipline, back to growth. To him, the night didn't represent triumph, it represented responsibility. Because real strength, he believed, wasn't proven in how hard you strike. It was proven in what you're willing to stand up for. The dojo where it happened eventually reopened under new leadership. The walls were repaired. The floor replaced. But those who trained there swore the air still felt different. Heavier, more serious, as if the space itself remembered. And maybe it did. Because some moments leave marks that no repairs can erase. That night became a reminder carried forward through generations of students. A reminder that martial arts begin and end with respect, and that loyalty to one's teacher is not a weakness, but the foundation of true strength. Bruce Lee walked away from that night quietly, just as he had entered the dojo. No applause. No celebration. Only the certainty that some lessons are not taught with words. They are lived, endured, and remembered forever. Bruce Lee didn't fight for fame. He didn't fight to prove he was the strongest man in the room. He fought because a student's duty never ends. Long after trophies fade. Long after crowds disappear. Long after the body grows tired. That duty remains. A true student carries his teacher's lessons not just in technique, but in character. In how he walks into a room. In how he responds to disrespect. In how he chooses restraint until restraint is no longer an option. That night was never about winning a fight. It was about drawing a line. Strength without respect is nothing. It becomes noise. It becomes cruelty. Skill without humility is empty. It looks impressive, but it collapses the moment ego is challenged. The Karatekas believed power came from domination. Bruce knew power came from discipline. They believed fear made them strong. Bruce understood that loyalty made him unbreakable. What separated Bruce from everyone else in that dojo wasn't speed or technique, it was purpose. Every movement he made was anchored to something deeper than anger. He wasn't reacting. He was answering. Answering for a teacher who stood alone. Answering for a tradition that refused to bow to arrogance. Answering for every student who had ever watched their master be disrespected and felt powerless. That is why the room went silent. That is why the story spread. People don't remember violence, they remember meaning. Years later, many who heard the story couldn't recall every strike or every move. But they all remembered the same lesson. When respect is violated, silence becomes permission. And when loyalty is tested, neutrality is a choice. Bruce Lee never called himself a hero. He never framed the night as revenge. To him, it was simple. A master teaches you how to stand. A student stands when that master can no longer do so alone. That is the difference between learning to fight and learning to be a warrior. Real power isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need approval. Real power is calm under pressure. It is restraint until action is required. It is knowing exactly who you are and who you stand for. And real warriors never forget their roots. They remember the hands that guided them when they were weak. They remember the voices that corrected them when they were wrong. They remember the patience that shaped them before strength ever did. That is why this story endures. Not because Bruce Lee fought 5 men, but because he never fought for himself. Backhand index pointing right if you believe true warriors protect their teachers. Like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Your support keeps these legends alive. Folded hands. Every comment keeps the story moving. Every like keeps the lesson alive. Every subscription helps pass these values to the next generation. Because techniques can be copied. Styles can be imitated. But honor must be lived. And once you understand that, you don't just train as a martial artist. You walk the path of a warrior. Dragon Fire.